Have you ever found yourself in a parking garage, holding your breath and contorting your body like an absolute gymnast just to squeeze out of a slightly opened car door? We've all been there, right? It's a uniquely frustrating, everyday sort of misery. But what happens when that occasional annoyance actually becomes a daily national crisis? Well, in today's Explainer, we're looking at a completely fascinating problem currently playing out across China's automotive landscape. It's a literal feature bloat that's resulted in modern electric vehicles completely outgrowing the very infrastructure built to hold them. And as we'll see, the solution to this seemingly local headache is poised to send shockwaves through the entire global auto industry. Okay, let's dive right into this. 10 centimeters. To visualize that, it's roughly the width of a standard smartphone. That tiny, tiny measurement is the agonizingly small clearance left when one of China's popular new passenger vehicles tries to squeeze into a standard parking space. According to recent reports, a lot of these popular electric SUVs and MPVs are now approaching or even exceeding 2 meters in width. In fact, one vehicle recently measured by Chinese state broadcaster CCTV came in at a massive 2.3 meters wide. Now, think about trying to park that 2.3 meter behemoth into a standard 2.4 meter wide parking space designed a decade ago. You are left with exactly 10 centimeters of clearance. That is barely enough room to slip your hand through, let alone open a door and actually exit the vehicle. And the sheer scale of this growth has happened over a surprisingly short period. Just take a look at this. By 2024, the average Chinese passenger car had ballooned to a staggering 1,704 kilograms. That represents a massive one-third increase in weight since 2012. So we aren't just talking about cars getting a little roomier on the inside. We're talking about a fundamental transformation in the footprint and the density of the average daily commuter vehicle. These cars are getting wider, for sure, but more importantly, they're getting incredibly heavy. Section 1. Batteries and bloat. Why exactly are these cars so massive? To really understand this literal feature bloat, we have to start with the power source itself. A massive driver of all this weight gain is range anxiety. In an incredibly competitive market, manufacturers are fiercely battling to win over consumers by promising astronomical driving ranges. We're talking about marketing vehicles capable of hitting up to 1,000 kilometers on a single charge. But that kind of range requires absolute brute force. According to experts, achieving that 1,000-kilometer benchmark can require immense battery packs weighing as much as 800 kilograms. Just think about that for a second. The battery alone weighs as much as an entire small vintage car. And while heavy batteries are a reality for EVs everywhere, the sheer scale of this problem is definitely unique to China, simply because the country produces way more electric vehicles than any other nation on Earth. But it's not just the batteries. It's the battle for the cabin experience. China's crowded EV market has pushed manufacturers to desperately differentiate themselves by turning cars into, essentially, mobile living spaces. Some models are explicitly designed to let users work comfortably, watch high-definition videos, or even brew coffee right from their center console. And yes, according to CCTV, a few models even come equipped with in-car toilets. That sounds almost humorous to some of us. From an engineering perspective, it's a total nightmare. Every single one of these bizarre, hyper-luxurious features requires extra hardware, extra wiring, extra plumbing, and most importantly, extra heavy weight. Section 2, the 2026 efficiency mandate. Beijing puts EVs on a diet. Because, let's face it, you can't just keep building wider parking lots and reinforcing bridges to accommodate heavier cars forever. Eventually, something has to give. Enter this new, absolutely unprecedented regulation taking effect on January 1st, 2026. China has become the very first country in the world to enforce a mandatory energy consumption standard for electric vehicles. This isn't just a friendly recommendation or some targeted goal. It is a hard rule. The mandate caps 2-ton EVs at a maximum energy consumption of 15.1 kilowatt-hours per 100 kilometers. This is tested under the CLTC cycle, which is essentially China's standardized testing method for vehicle range and efficiency. Ultimately, this tightens the previous recommended limits by about 11%. And the penalty for failing to meet this standard? It's huge. The models simply cannot be produced, they cannot be sold, and they cannot be registered. It is an absolute, non-negotiable barrier to entry. And this brilliantly illustrates the paradigm shift this law creates. The old Focus, that brute force method we talked about, was all about just throwing bigger, heavier batteries into the chassis to achieve those headline-grabbing 1,000-kilometer range numbers. But the new Focus, it forces elegance. Manufacturers must now prioritize better aerodynamics, cutting-edge lighter materials, and extreme drivetrain optimization. It's a complete shift from raw power to refined efficiency. In fact, engineers expect that by simply optimizing these elements without changing the battery capacity at all, an average EV's range will actually increase by about 7% just by complying with this new standard. So it's really a win-win for efficiency. So this domestic shift builds into a much larger story. We've talked a lot about Chinese parking spaces and local regulations. And you might be sitting there wondering, okay, why does this matter to me if I live in Europe or North America? Why should the global market care about a local infrastructure problem? Well, to answer that, we really have to grasp the sheer staggering scale of the Chinese EV machine. According to the International Energy Agency, China produced 16 million electric cars in the year 2025 alone. 16 million! They are the undisputed heavyweight champion of EV manufacturing. And the thing is, those cars aren't just staying inside China's borders. We are currently witnessing a massive surge of Chinese EV exports flooding right into new global markets. Which leads us to the strategic genius behind this domestic diet. As Chinese EVs surge into international markets, these mandatory domestic regulations are acting as a brutal but highly effective training ground. By forcing automakers to figure out how to build lighter, hyper-efficient vehicles right now, Beijing is perfectly positioning their domestic companies to meet parallel, tightening emissions and efficiency standards in highly regulated export markets like the US and Europe. So they aren't just solving a domestic parking problem, they are actively engineering a fleet of highly competitive, global-ready vehicles that will easily pass strict Western efficiency tests. It is just a fascinating chain of events. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. We started with the incredibly mundane frustration of not being able to open a car door in a tight parking garage. But could that very domestic problem, a literal lack of physical space in Chinese parking lots, ultimately be the catalyst that forces the entire world to drive lighter, smarter, and far more efficient electric vehicles? It is a remarkable butterfly effect, proving once again how a 10-centimeter gap can ultimately reshape a massive global industry. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the world around you, and I'll catch you next time.